Happy Monday. Welcome to the Grief School. Welcome to the lesson for today. Today's lesson is breaking the cycle of avoidance in grief, which everybody needs to learn that we do this thing called avoidance in our grief. Before I get to that, I want to say this. These lives are not live. I'm recording them because it's the best way that I can schedule in and get the message to you every week. I want to at least be coming to you 3 times a week and doing some training on grief at the grief school. And this is the best way that I can get it. If you're adamant, you just want to see me at live, that's going to be in TikTok. So I love you all, but I really want to be able to do some trainings every week on grief. And it's gotten crazy, and this is the best way that I can do it. So welcome to the Grief School. If you're new here, my name is Sharon Brubaker. I do a live training on something about grief in the Grief School every week to help you guys getting a full picture of what it is we are doing, what it is we are needing to process in our grief, what it is we are doing, what it is we are needing to process in our grief. Why? Because we all came here with the ability to learn how to, and knew how to grieve. But over time, that ability has moved from us through our parents, through our grandparents, through constantly being told to get rid of those emotions, don't do that. And so what we're doing is we're retraining ourselves to go back to what we already know to be true. What we already know to be true. My name is Sharon Brubaker. I'm a griever. I know when I walked up the stairs to tell my sister Erica that Austin had drowned, that I knew I didn't know anything about grief. I knew that. And one of the reasons that we don't is because it feels bad. This grief feels bad. And because it feels bad, we immediately go to our brain and think, that feels bad. Ooh, I don't want to do that. I used to describe it like this a long time ago. I used to say, I don't know what that is, but I'm not going that way. Grief these are emotions that feel bad, right? They are emotions that feel bad. They're also thoughts that feel bad. We think the thoughts feel, but they really don't. We think the thoughts are attached to our feelings, but they're not. They're really attached to our emotions, which is attached to our heart. Okay, so that kind of breaks it down. This is exactly what's happening. We have a thought, and then it sends us an emotion. But with all of that, it feels bad. That just feels bad. I don't know what that is, but I don't want to feel it. And so, because it feels bad, and because we don't like the way it feels, we do what I'm going to talk about today, and we avoid. So, let me get my handy dandy little towel here and wipe this off. So, grief is a broken heart that takes place. Grief this is Monday morning. Grief is an emotional experience that takes place in our heart. Grief is an emotional experience that takes place in our heart. Grief emotions are heavy. Grief emotions are heavy. And one of the main emotions from grief, even though there are a lot, but one of the ones we really don't like is fear. We really don't like fear because grief feels a lot like fear. And we don't like it. It feels sad. We don't like it. Okay? Okay, so we got that. So today we're talking about avoiding. Avoiding grief. And avoiding the emotion of fear, pain, anger, sadness, longing. Okay, one of the things that we do to avoid, how we avoid, is we keep busy. We keep busy so we don't have to feel the fear. Now, here's the thing about keep busy, is that we tell it to ourselves. We tell ourselves to keep busy. I'm going to go back to work. One of the things that Erica did was she was like, I'm going to go back to work. I was shocked when she said it because she was thinking I should keep busy. The other thing is we think it, first we think it, but people around us tell us to do it. Girl, you just keep busy, and I promise this will pass. So keep busy is one of the things we do. We also avoid people. We avoid people. So the doctor that gave me the diagnosis, I don't want to see that doctor anymore. The girl who's now dating my husband, I don't want to see her anymore. We avoid people. I can't be friends with them any longer because they remind me of me and Bob. I cannot go out with her and have a glass of wine because I remember the last time we were together, it was me and him and her, and we were all at the concert together. We avoid people. We avoid places. We avoid driving by the hospital. We avoid going down that street. I don't come into my neighborhood that way anymore because he loved coming in that way. Every time I turn that corner, it reminds me of that. Last year, Tony had to go to the cardiologist. I was in the car. I hadn't gone in yet because my phone rang. My phone rang and it was my girlfriend, and she was having a really hard time. And so Tony went up to the cardiologist. I stayed in the car and had the conversation with her. I was in that same parking lot today, and every single time I'm in that parking lot, it reminds me of her. She is still alive. She didn't die. Hear me out, friends. We just had a 1-hour conversation sitting in the parking lot. Whenever I'm in that parking lot, it reminds me of her. It makes me think of her. As a matter of fact, I'm going to text her today. We avoid going to places because they remind us of the person. We don't listen to songs because they remind us of our person. We don't have certain conversations with people because they remind us of our person, or we know that if I start talking to them, they're going to bring him up, and I don't want to talk about that. They remind us of our person. So we avoid by keeping busy. We avoid by doing these things. And we love to numb out. We love to numb out. The other thing we like to do is get numb. So we like to get numb. I'm going to give you guys some more space on my board. We like to numb out. And ways that we numb out is with food. We do social media. We do drinking, food, sex, nail biting, right? Those are just a few. So we avoid, because we're most often, I'm put fear here because it's the number one that we're trying to avoid, but we're trying to avoid the grief. We keep busy. We avoid people. We avoid places. We avoid songs. We avoid conversations. We avoid wearing certain shirts. We avoid smelling certain colognes. We are the queens of avoiding. I only have a few things left here. What are you avoiding right now? Then we use tools. We use our social media. We use our cell phone to get there. We use social media. We drink. We drink wine. We drink the beer. We eat the food. We do the sleeping. We do the nail biting. We become so good at avoiding that we have tools. So this right here is our tools. We have tools to avoid. Right? Television, all of those things. Why does it feel safer to avoid? It's safer to avoid because it's the brain's way of protecting us. The brain likes to protect us from the pain. It's fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze. I'm going to write that out. Is a response in grief. And this is how avoidance fits in. Maybe you keep telling yourself, you're going to go through these things someday, but then someday never comes. I'm going to allow the grief to come in. Or maybe you're avoiding driving down that street. I know one day I'm going to drive down there. I mean, how many people had a bad experience on an airplane and now they don't fly? You hear them say they don't fly. They've never gone to the bottom of it and worked out why they don't fly. They just don't fly anymore. Some people they never go down that street again. They never talk to that person again. They never have that conversation again. because they're avoiding their grief altogether. They're avoiding the grief altogether. We justify this. And hear me out, friends. For a little while, I'm not saying that some days it's not okay to avoid. That's not what I'm saying. Some days the only way you can make it through is avoiding. Some days the only way that I could make it through was absolutely avoiding. Not talking about the fact that he had died, not talking about the grief. Some days that was the only way that I could make it through. But what happens with a lot of us is we make the avoiding our only technique for grieving. My only technique for grieving is the thought that I'm going to be like this for the rest of my life. I'll never get better. This is never going to change. And we sit in that it's going to be like this for the rest of our life. So let me show you how this happens. Your brain thinks it's really smart. It not only thinks it's really smart, because I think it's arrogant. I think your brain has a big ego and it thinks it can fix this. That's me. I just think that. But it also doesn't know how to fix it, so it's throwing out all the tools. It is throwing out all the tools because what does it see here? It sees this little heart. This little heart is so broken. It sees it as sad and as if it can't move. But it has an idea that it needs to fix this. Guess who else thinks it needs to fix this broken heart? Everybody around you. Everybody perceives you as broken. They perceive your whole body as broken, not just your heart. They perceive that everything is broken, not just your heart. And so they're going to try to fix it. But the brain thinks it knows how. And one of the ways it tells you is keep busy. Right? It tells you to keep busy. But it also is telling you this: get away. Get away. Don't go there. Right? And that is the fight, the flight, or the freeze. It's telling you, don't do these things. Don't do these things. Don't do these things, because it thinks it will make it better. Okay. In the end, what ends up happening is we can avoid because it feels better, and for a while we don't feel it. But what happens is that this continues to grow, and the avoiding doesn't help this go away. It doesn't help it go away. It just stays there. So the emotional numbness gets worse. Your disconnection from the world gets worse. Your disconnection from the living gets heavier. You have unprocessed pain that will resurface over and over and over again, no matter what's going on. You cry at diaper commercials. You cry when you see your friends. You cry when you get the invitations in the mail. Every time something happens, it sends you back to this unprocessed grief. You take your grief everywhere you go, and you make everything in your life about your grief. You see everything in the world through grieving eyes. At least before, you were sort of happy-go-lucky and you could get things done, but now you see everything through grieving eyes. You have increased anxiety, increased depression, and the fear is off the chain. It is as if I asked you to take this beach ball and push it underwater. I have a beach ball here. It's imaginary, but here's a beach ball. I want you to push it underwater, and I want you to just hold on to it and hold on to it and hold on to it. Hold on to it. I'm going to be right back. Hold on to that beach ball. I'm going to be right back. That's exactly. Keep holding it. Don't keep holding it. Keep holding that beach ball underwater. That's what we're doing every time we cut this grief off in our heart. This is the beach ball. This is the ball. This is the water level. You're just pushing it down. Hold on to the ball. Don't let it go. I didn't say let it go yet. You're holding it. Now your arms are getting tired. Your elbows are starting to get weak. Your arms are starting to shake because you hold on to it. It's like pushing the beach ball underwater. The longer you hold it down, the harder it gets until it pops up. And when it pops up, you take it out on everyone. This is not going anywhere, my friends, unless you take care of it. And even though the brain thinks that it can, it is prolonging the avoidance by insisting that you fight the grief, you fight back against the grief, you run from the grief, or you freeze and you just stand there and let it happen. Okay. Hold on, I gotta flip my notes. Okay. What are we gonna do here? What are we doing here? Okay, Sharon, then fix this. No, that's not what these lessons are about. These lessons are about for you to see, are you avoiding? Are you avoiding in any way? Are you currently avoiding your grief in any way? When was the last time you cried? When was the last time you allowed the grief in and you cried for a second? When was the last time you talked about the grief? When was the last time you talked to someone about the grief? When was the last time you considered driving down that street, even though you know it's hard? Even though you know it's hard. Some days, honestly, friends, I'd like to see you drive down that street. I'd like to see you drive down the street to the hospital and cry the entire time. Because what that is that's letting go of the beach ball. Letting go of the beach ball and letting it explode. That's all it is. So I'm going to give you 5 tips of things that you can do. Number 1, acknowledge that you're avoiding your grief. So number 1 is simply acknowledge. Number 1 is acknowledge. Acknowledge. Acknowledge that you're avoiding the grief. Number 2 is take a small step. Okay. Acknowledge you're avoiding it. Be honest. Number 1 is acknowledge. Acknowledge your grief. Be honest with yourself about where you are and where you've been and if you're avoiding. So acknowledge means be honest. Hey, friends, just so I know if you're here, if you know that you are avoiding, put a 1 in the chat. I just want to see who you are. Put a 1 in the chat so that I know you saw this. Take small steps. I want you to choose one thing that you've been avoiding and gently lean into it. So if it's to drive by, take one thing that you've been avoiding. And do that one thing. Take one thing and do that one thing. These are the worst notes ever. They're all over the board. Okay, grief time. Within your grief time, I taught about grief time last week. Within your grief time, I want you to take 5 to 10 minutes a day to feel your grief intentionally. So number 3 is do some grief time. Grief time means allowing. Grief times is what we do within our grief time that matters. What are you going to do within your grief time? Today, I'm asking for 5 to 10 minutes this week. If you're a person that's been avoiding a lot and you haven't been honest with yourself, this one, number 3, is going to be really great for you. Number 3 is really great. So number 1, you can acknowledge and be honest about where you are. You can do that. Number 2, you can take a small step and take one thing that you've been avoiding, go near it, stand near it, talk about it, think about it, share it with a friend, or drive down that street. Take one thing. Number 3, grief time. Within your grief time, you can take 5 to 10 minutes to grieve. Okay, number 4. What we can do with number 4 is talk about it. I want you to talk about the thing that you've been avoiding. Talk about the thing you've been avoiding. Number 4 is talk about the thing you've been avoiding. You can talk about it in Grief Study Hall, which is tomorrow from 1 to 3. You can talk about it Thursday from 10 to 12. You can talk about it tomorrow in the live. You can talk about it Wednesday in the live. You can talk about it Thursday in the live. There's plenty of places that you can come and talk about what you have not been honest about. It just takes one step. Acknowledging it doesn't mean you're going around sharing about it. I'm not asking you to journal it. I didn't ask you to post it on social media. I didn't say call up all your girlfriends. Just say, you know what, Sharon's right. I have been avoiding this thing. Let me stop avoiding this one thing in my grief. All right. And number 5 is fear. Reframe the fear. Can you still see me? Reframe the fear. Remind yourself that facing grief doesn't mean drowning in it. Remind yourself that sitting in fear, even for a minute, acknowledging that the fear is there. So you think about the last day. You think about, because you can hear that phone call in your mind over and over again. It never goes away. You hear them saying, hey, I have something to tell you, or the hospital calls, or whatever your thing is, You hear it, and every time you go there, you get this fear. But for what happens to a lot of us is we stay in that memory, right? So we're in the memory of getting the phone call that our person is no longer here. I'm in the memory. Instead of staying in the memory, I want you to start concentrating on the fear. Feel the fear. Know that it's there. And then I want you to count backwards from 5. Let the fear know, oh, fear, I see you. I'm going to let you stay here for 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You let the fear stay in for 5 seconds and then you cut it off. But what we normally do is we go, that's fear. And we change the thought, we grab the phone, we change to social media, we ignore the emotion on purpose. What I'm asking you to do is reframe the fear by acknowledging it's there and being honest with yourself and counting backwards from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just allow the fear to be there. Just allow the fear to be there for 5 seconds. You don't have to do this all at once. You just have to do one of them this week. You don't have to do all 5. If you acknowledged in yourself that you are avoiding, here are 5 tips to not avoiding this week. Know that I'm here with you, friends. Know that I see you. Know that I'm going to be with you all along the way of this journey. Avoidance is common. Everybody avoids. Even I avoid it. Everyone avoids in their grief, but it doesn't make it disappear. It only means that you're avoiding it, and it's going to come back. It's going to rear its head. Facing your grief in small steps and intentionally taking these small steps can lead to healing. You don't have to do this alone. Support is available for you. And healing begins at the grief school. And if you're here today and you've watched this tape all the way through, then I know you're working on your healing. This was a great action step today. Talking about avoiding our grief was a great action step. I'm so honored to be here. And I'll be back on Wednesday. These are recorded lessons. I wanted to figure out a way to give them to you 3 times a week. And this was the best I could do at this moment because I am rewriting the book. Grieve That Shit. So I'm writing it, not rewriting it, but I'm writing it. And so I'm working on this book, and this was the best way I could still show up for you. Know that I see you. Know that I am you. Know that I am a griever too. And that's what got me here. I love you, friends. I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye.